I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. At 70 years old, I found myself standing at the entrance of my own beach house in Malibu, the keys trembling in my hands. "What is this old parasite doing here? There's no room for you," my daughter-in-law Ellie shouted at me from the terrace. I had arrived that Friday morning expecting to find my house empty as usual. Instead, my home had been invaded, my furniture ruined, my garden destroyed. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. I love to know how far our stories reach. That Friday morning, I drove to my beach house in Malibu as I had done hundreds of times over the last 20 years. The route was familiar, the curves of the coastal highway, the smell of salt in the air, the sight of palm trees swaying against the blue sky. This house represented everything I had achieved in my life after being widowed at 50. Every brick, every tile, every plant in the garden had been bought with money I earned working as a seamstress. My name is Tiffany Brooks, and this house was my sanctuary, my reward for decades of hard work. When my husband Michael died unexpectedly from a heart attack, I was left alone to raise our son Sean, who was just 25 at the time. We had no savings, no inheritance, just a small life insurance policy that barely covered the funeral expenses. I remember sitting at my kitchen table the night after the funeral, looking at the bills piling up and wondering how I would survive. That's when I made a promise to myself I would build security for myself through my own hard work. I had always been skilled with a needle and thread, so I started a small seamstress business, taking in alterations and custom clothing orders. For 5 years, I worked from sunrise to sunset, 7 days a week. I saved every penny I could. When Sean got his first real job and moved out, I took the opportunity to downsize from our family home in Chicago to a smaller apartment, adding the difference to my savings. 10 years after Michael's death, I had enough for a down payment on a small plot of land in Malibu, just a vacant lot with weeds and rocks. But with a magnificent ocean view, it took another 5 years to save enough to start building the house, and 5 more to finish it exactly as I wanted. I designed every detail myself, the large windows facing the ocean, the wraparound terrace where I could sit and watch the sunset, the garden with native plants that required little water but provided beautiful colors year-round. This house wasn't just a building to me. It was my achievement, my legacy, my proof that a widow with limited resources could create something beautiful and lasting through dedication and hard work. As I turned into the driveway that Friday morning, I noticed something strange. There were cars I didn't recognize parked in my garage. Loud music echoed from the property, a festive sound that seemed out of place in the quiet refuge I had created. My chest tightened as I parked my car. Something wasn't right. When I got out, the impact of what I saw took my breath away. My beautiful garden, which I tended myself every weekend, was devastated. Empty beer cans dotted the perfectly cut lawn. Children were running across the terrace, kicking a ball against my pots of red geraniums that I had cultivated with such love. The wicker chairs I had bought the previous year were covered with wet towels and dirty clothes. I walked slowly toward the entrance, the keys weighing in my hand as never before. That's when I saw her, Ellie Price, my daughter-in-law, standing in the main doorway as if she owned the place. She was wearing my favorite apron, the one I had embroidered myself a decade ago. Her eyes had that cold look I knew so well. "Ellie, I didn't know you were here," I said, trying to stay calm despite the chaos around me. "This is my house. I come here every holiday weekend for the last 20 years. She laughed, not a normal laugh, but a sound loaded with cruelty that made me feel small and insignificant, as if I were the intruder on my own property. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Sean told me we could use the house whenever we wanted. Besides, we're doing something productive here. You just come to complain and ruin our family plans." Before I could answer, more people began to appear behind her. Martha Price, her gray-haired mother, who looked at me with disdain. 2 teenage boys I recognized as Ellie's nephews. An older man in a Hawaiian shirt I didn't know, a young woman with a baby in her arms, and another man smoking calmly on my porch. They all looked at me as if I were the problem. "Is this the famous mother-in-law you talk about so much?" Martha asked, sizing me up from head to toe. I thought she'd be more imposing. She seems rather common. The snickers that followed hit me like arrows. There I was at 70 years old, in my simple travel clothes, being ridiculed by strangers on the property I built with my own hard work. "Where is Sean?" I asked, feeling my heart race. My son needs to be here to explain this absurd situation. "Sean is working as always," Ellie replied, crossing her arms. "Unlike you, he has real responsibilities. Look, Tiffany, there's no room for you here. The bedrooms are all occupied. The kitchen is being used to prepare food for the whole family. And frankly, your presence is only going to create unnecessary tension." I stood there paralyzed. She was actually kicking me out of my own house, the house I built brick by brick after my husband's death, the house I worked days and nights as a seamstress to pay for. "Besides," Ellie continued with a venomous smile, "I already spoke with Sean, and we agree that this house needs to be used more. It makes no sense for it to be empty most of the time while you live comfortably in Chicago. We have children who need space to grow." Her words hit me like stones. 20 years building this place after my husband died. 20 years paying every cent of the mortgage with money I earned sewing clothes for other people's families. 20 years tending to every detail, every plant, every corner of this place that had become my personal sanctuary. "This house is mine, Ellie," I managed to say, though my voice sounded weaker than I would have liked. "I have the deeds. I pay all the bills." "Oh, that's enough," she interrupted, raising her voice. "It's always the same thing that it's yours, that you pay. Sean is your son, isn't he? What's yours is also his, and what's his is also mine. That's how normal families work." The children stopped playing, and everyone watched me in silence. I could feel their eyes judging me, waiting for my reaction. Humiliation burned my cheeks like fire, but something inside me refused to break. One of the teenagers, who seemed to be Ellie's niece, came closer and looked at me insolently. "Why don't you just go to a hotel? There's no space for anyone else here." "All right, dear," I finally said with a smile that came from my soul, but which I knew didn't reach my eyes. "I understand the situation perfectly." Ellie smiled triumphantly, believing she had won. The others seemed satisfied, as if they had witnessed a just victory. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. I walked back to my car with slow, dignified steps. As I drove away to find a hotel, my mind traveled to the past, to when this property was nothing more than a vacant lot full of weeds and dreams. The Pacific View Inn cost me $285 a night, money I hadn't planned on spending because I was supposed to be sleeping in my own bed. But there I was, checking in like any other tourist while my house was occupied by invaders who felt entitled to my property. That night, sitting on the hotel balcony, looking at the lights of my house in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, a cold, calculated anger beginning to form inside me. It wasn't that impulsive anger that makes you scream and lose control. It was something much more dangerous, the intelligent anger of a woman who had survived poverty, widowhood, and decades of hard work. Ellie had made a fatal mistake. She had underestimated Tiffany Brooks. The next morning, I woke up at 6:00 a.m. after a night of restless sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ellie's arrogant smile and heard her venomous words echoing in my mind. I had a quick coffee in the hotel restaurant and decided to go back to the house to try for a calmer conversation. Maybe it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe Sean would show up and put an end to this absurd situation. When I arrived at 8:00 a.m., I found the front door locked my own door. I had to ring the doorbell as if I were a visitor. Ellie's sister Vanessa opened it, still in her pajamas and with an angry face. "What do you want now?" she asked without even greeting me. I explained that I needed to pick up some personal things and talk to Ellie. Her response left me stunned. "Ellie is sleeping, and your things aren't here anymore. We put them in bags in the garage so they wouldn't be in the way." My things in bags in the garage as if they were trash. I felt as if I had been stabbed in the chest. She let me in, but I felt like an intruder in my own home. The smell was different, a mix of strange food, cigarette smoke, and cheap perfume. The living room was unrecognizable, filled with inflatable mattresses and clothes scattered everywhere. When I entered the kitchen, my heart almost stopped. My beautiful kitchen, the one I designed thinking of all the family meals I would prepare there, was completely destroyed. The stove was covered in burnt grease, the sink overflowing with dirty dishes that already smelled bad. My best pans had permanent stains on the bottom. "Where are my porcelain plates?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Oh, some of them broke. The kids were playing, and you know how they are," Vanessa shrugged. "Ellie says they were very old anyway." My porcelain plates, which I bought one by one over the years, saving up to complete the set, which I only used on special occasions because I treated them like treasures, were broken, discarded as if they had no value. I went upstairs to my master bedroom, the sanctuary where I had planned to rest. The door was open, and inside was Martha, organizing clothes in my closet as if it were her own. "Excuse me," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "This is my room." "Ah, my daughter Ellie explained everything," she replied dismissively. "Don't worry, I'll take very good care of your things. Look, I even organized your clothes in these bags so they don't get wrinkled. My dresses, my blouses, my shoes, all my personal clothing was stuffed into plastic bags like items destined for donation. 2 unknown boys were sleeping in my bed, and my favorite pillows were on the floor covered in stains. As I took in this surreal scene, I noticed something that caught my attention. My secret closet, that hidden space behind the main wardrobe where I kept important documents and items of sentimental value, was ajar, a place that no one but me should know about. With my heart pounding, I waited for Martha to leave the room for a moment and went to the closet. The space had been completely violated. My documents were in disarray, some on the floor. The jewelry I inherited from my mother was gone. The property deeds for the house were crumpled as if someone had looked through them carelessly. But the most alarming thing was finding papers that weren't mine, legal documents with Sean and Ellie's names on them. I took them with trembling hands and read quickly. It was an application for a change of ownership. They wanted to transfer the house into Sean's name, claiming that I, due to my advanced age and deteriorating mental condition, was no longer capable of managing valuable properties. Deteriorating mental condition me, the woman who had managed her finances perfectly for 70 years, who had built a fortune from scratch, who still worked and maintained her financial independence. They wanted to declare me mentally incompetent to steal my house. The paper was dated from the previous week. This confirmed that the invasion hadn't been spontaneous, but part of an elaborate plan to take over my property using the law in their favor. At the bottom of the papers, I found something that chilled me to the bone, a real estate appraisal. It had valued my beach house at $3.2 million. And there was a handwritten note in Ellie's script. "With this money, we can buy a bigger apartment and send the kids to private school. We just need S to sign the papers and for the little old lady not to cause any problems." The little old lady, that's what they called me behind my back. The little old lady who shouldn't cause problems while they stripped me of everything I had built in my life. I put all the documents in my bag as evidence. This wasn't just a family invasion. It was a planned robbery, an elaborate fraud to strip me of my life's work with my own blood as an accomplice. I went downstairs silently, and as I passed the hallway, I heard Ellie on the phone on the terrace. She was talking loudly without worrying about being discreet. "No, Mom, don't worry. The lawyer says it's very easy. Since Sean is an only child, he can claim the inheritance in advance due to the mother's incapacity. And once the house is in his name, we can do whatever we want with it." Advanced inheritance due to incapacity, they wanted to declare me mentally incompetent to steal my inheritance while I was still alive. Yes, we already sent the fake medical papers. We paid $2,000 to that doctor from the clinic to sign a report saying she has senile dementia. Sean didn't want to at first, but I explained to him that it's for the good of the children. Fake medical papers, a corrupt doctor, a fabricated report of senile dementia. My own son convinced that stripping me of my property was for the good of the children. I left the house without saying goodbye. There was nothing left to talk about. Words had lost all their meaning. This was no longer a family dispute that could be resolved with conversations and good feelings. This was a war. And they had fired the first shot using the dirtiest weapons possible: lies, false documents, medical corruption, and the manipulation of my own son. On the way back to the hotel, my hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from fear but from determination. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Tiffany Brooks would not be a victim of this betrayal. She would be the protagonist of her own justice. On Monday morning, I drove straight to the bank. I needed to verify exactly how much money I had available for this war. For the last 20 years, I had continued to save religiously, even after finishing paying off the house. Every month, I put away $300 from my pension and the income from my sewing work. I learned early on that saved money was power. It was security. It was freedom. The bank manager, Mr. Davis, had known me for 15 years, a serious and professional man who had always respected my financial discipline. "Tiffany, how can I help you today?" he asked with a warm smile. "I need the exact balance of all my accounts, and I need to talk about a sensitive legal matter." When he showed me the numbers on the screen, I smiled for the first time in days. I had $87,000 in savings, plus $23,000 in certificates of deposit, and $12,000 in my checking account, $122,000 in total. Ellie had been mistaken. She thought I was a poor little old lady who depended only on a miserable pension. She didn't know that Tiffany Brooks had been a tireless worker her whole life, saving every penny to protect herself from exactly this kind of situation. "Mr. Davis, I need you to freeze any attempts by third parties to access my accounts, and I need an official letter from the bank confirming my mental capacity to manage my finances. Of course, Tiffany." "Is there a problem?" "My family is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to take my assets." His face grew serious. "This is very serious. Do you need a recommendation for a specialized lawyer?" "Yes, please." He gave me the name and phone number of William Patterson, a lawyer specializing in family law and property fraud. "He's the best in these types of cases. Tell him I sent you." I left the bank with a new energy coursing through my veins. It wasn't just the peace of mind of knowing I had the financial resources to defend myself. It was the mental clarity of having a concrete plan of action. I called William Patterson from the parking lot. The secretary gave me an appointment for that same afternoon. "The attorney can see you at 4:30. It's urgent. Isn't it very urgent?" I spent the rest of the morning organizing all the documents I had collected, the fake property transfer papers, photos of the damage to my house, the list of stolen items, and copies of all my legitimate property deeds. I also printed screenshots of Vanessa's social media where she was bragging about her new beach house. At 400 years, I was sitting in William Patterson's elegant office. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and intelligent eyes that inspired immediate confidence. "Mrs. Brooks, tell me everything from the beginning. Don't omit a single detail." I narrated the entire story, the invasion of my house, Ellie's humiliations, the fraudulent documents, the fake medical report, the stolen jewelry, Sean's betrayal. He made detailed notes, asking precise questions that showed his experience in these types of cases. "Do you have the original property documents?" he asked, looking over his glasses. "Yes, all of them. The house is 100% in my name. I paid every cent for the construction, and I have all the receipts from the last 20 years. The doctor who supposedly signed the dementia report, has he ever examined you?" "Never in my life. I don't even know his name." "Excellent. This is falsification of medical documents, a federal offense." "Do you have any documentation for the stolen jewelry?" "Yes, some of it, especially my late husband's watch, is insured for $3,000. William smiled. "Mrs. Brooks, your case is solid. Very solid. We have property invasion, theft, document forgery, attempted property fraud, and possibly medical corruption. Your family has gotten themselves into big trouble. What can we do?" "Several things. First, tomorrow, we are going to file an eviction lawsuit for illegal invasion. Second, we will report the theft of your jewelry to the police. Third, we will report the falsification of medical documents to the medical board and the district attorney's office. And fourth, we will request a restraining order to prevent them from continuing to use your name fraudulently." "How long will all this take?" "The eviction can be immediate if the judge sees clear evidence of invasion. In cases like this, where the invaders have no legal right to the property, the law acts quickly. How much will it cost? My fee is $5,000 for the entire process. Can you pay it? I can pay it today if you like. His smile widened. I like working with clients who take their legal defense seriously. Mrs. Brooks, your family thought you were a helpless little old lady, but they were mistaken. You are a prepared woman. I've been preparing to defend myself from the world for 70 years. Counselor, I'm not going to stop now. Excellent attitude. One important question: are you willing to go all the way with this? Because when we start this process, your relationship with your son will likely be irreparable. I was silent for a moment, thinking of Sean, of the boy he had been, of the man he could have been, of the coward he had become. Counselor, my son betrayed me for money, declared me mentally incompetent for money, and publicly humiliated me for money. If our relationship can be broken so easily over money, then it was never a real relationship to begin with. William nodded with respect. Understood. We will proceed with everything. There's something else, I said. I want them to understand that they completely underestimated their opponent. I want them to learn that the consequences of betraying family are real and permanent. What do you have in mind? I want this process to be public. I want all their friends, neighbors, and acquaintances to know exactly what they did. I want the social cost of their betrayal to be as high as the legal cost. That can be arranged. Court records are public, and we can make sure the local media hears about such a scandalous case. I left that office feeling completely different. I was no longer Tiffany Brooks, the betrayed and humiliated mother. Now I was Tiffany Brooks, the woman who was fighting back with every legal weapon at her disposal. That night, from my hotel room, I called my sister Laura in Phoenix. I told her the whole story. Tiffany, I can't believe Sean would do that after everything you sacrificed for him. It no longer matters what I sacrificed, Laura. What matters is what I'm going to get back. I hung up the phone and sat on the bed, looking toward my house. From the hotel window, I could see the lights on, the music still playing, the celebration continuing as if nothing had happened. Tomorrow would be a very different day for all of them. On Tuesday at 8:00 a.m., William Patterson arrived at my house with 3 legal documents, a police officer, and a notary public. I arrived at the exact same time in a taxi, dressed in my best gray suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. I saw Ellie's family having breakfast on my terrace when they saw the legal caravan park in the garage. I saw Ellie drop her coffee cup when she recognized the official plates of the police cruiser. "Good morning," William said in a professional and loud voice. "I am attorney William Patterson, legal representative of Mrs. Tiffany Brooks, the rightful owner of this property. We have come to deliver an immediate eviction order for illegal invasion." Ellie ran off the terrace with a look of panic on her face that I will never forget. Vanessa appeared right behind her, recording everything with her cell phone as if it were another episode for her social media. Martha, who was wearing one of my robes, looked confused and scared. The officer presented the eviction order and began to list the violations: invasion of private property, destruction of personal property, theft of valuable items. As he spoke, I watched the face of each of them, the shock, the disbelief, the growing fear that their actions would have real consequences. "You have exactly 2 hours to collect your personal belongings and leave the property," the officer announced. "Any item belonging to Mrs. Brooks must remain here. I will supervise the process to ensure that you do not take anything that does not belong to you." 2 hours, Vanessa shouted. "This is impossible. We have children here." "You should have thought of that before invading someone else's property," the notary replied with professional calm. At that moment, Sean arrived, driving at high speed. He got out of the car with an expression of total desperation. Surely, someone had told him about the police arriving. "What's going on here?" he asked, almost out of breath. "Your wife and her family are being legally evicted from your mother's property for illegal invasion," William explained. "And you are being subpoenaed as an accomplice in a case of attempted property fraud." I showed him the documents. "The property transfer papers you were going to sign to steal my house. Sean. The papers your wife had hidden in my secret closet." Sean turned pale. I looked him in the eyes, searching for some trace of the son I raised. But I only found the gaze of a stranger, a man who had chosen to betray his own mother for money. Mom, I can explain, he said in a trembling voice. There's nothing left to explain. You've already made your decision. Ellie approached Sean and whispered something in his ear. He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. What is your wife telling you? Sean, I asked. Does she want you to tell the police that I have mental problems, that I make things up? Those words hurt me more deeply than any insult Ellie had uttered. Even in the face of the evidence, in the face of the law, in the face of everything that was happening, they were still trying to label me as mentally incompetent. Mr. Sean Nelson, William intervened. Here is your official subpoena. You have 3 days to appear in family court to answer to the accusations of complicity in attempted property fraud against a senior citizen. Complicity? But I'm her son, Sean protested. She can't sue her own son. Mr. Nelson, the officer said, the law makes no exceptions for kinship when it comes to fraud and theft. A crime is a crime, no matter who commits it. The next 2 hours were a spectacle of chaos and humiliation for Ellie's family. From the terrace of my recovered home, I watched as the invasion they had planned so carefully completely unraveled. Martha was the first to break. After half an hour of crying and shouting, she sat on the stairs and refused to help with the packing. This is your fault, Ellie, she screamed at her daughter. You told me everything was taken care of. You told me the little old lady had agreed to everything. Mom, shut up and help me pack, Ellie responded, desperately stuffing clothes into plastic bags. The children ran through the house crying and screaming, not understanding why they had to leave the paradise where they had been playing. A boy of about 8, whom I recognized as my grandson Jake, came up to me with red, confused eyes. Grandma, why are you kicking us out? We didn't do anything wrong. My heart broke a little. The children were innocent in all this pawns in their parents' scheme. I'm not kicking you out because you did something wrong, I explained in a soft voice. I'm asking you to leave because this is my house, and your family came here without asking my permission. But Mom said it was our house now. Your mom was mistaken. Ellie heard our conversation and came over, furious. Don't talk to my children. You have no right to confuse them even more. I'm not confusing them. You confused them by bringing them to a house that wasn't yours. This house is ours. Sean is your son. Children inherit from their parents. Children inherit when their parents die, not when their parents are still alive and well. You're already old. What do you need such a big house for at your age? William intervened immediately. Ma'am, every comment you make about my client's age is being documented as additional evidence of age discrimination and psychological abuse against a senior citizen. Ellie fell silent instantly, her face red with anger. Sean had been carrying suitcases to the cars in complete silence, avoiding my gaze. When there were only 30 minutes left, he finally approached me. Mom, we need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about. Sean, look, I admit things got out of hand, but we can fix this. We can reach a family agreement without involving lawyers and police. What kind of agreement? You keep the house. Of course, we accept that it was a mistake to come without telling you, and in return, you drop all the actions and the jewelry. We'll return everything that was taken by mistake. By mistake. Do you really think I'm going to accept that stealing my mother's jewelry was a mistake? Mom, it wasn't theft. It was a misunderstanding. And the fake medical report was also a misunderstanding. And the request for property transfer due to mental incapacity and publicly humiliating me by calling me a parasite. He remained silent, unable to find excuses for so many betrayals. It wasn't me. It was Ellie, he finally muttered. But you were there. You saw me being humiliated by your wife in my own house. And you said nothing. I didn't know what to say. You knew exactly what to say, Sean. You knew you had to defend your mother, but you chose to remain silent so as not to upset your wife. He became desperate, trying to find an escape that no longer existed. Okay, Ellie behaved badly. I admit it. What more do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. I want you to admit that you planned to steal my house using false documents. I want you to admit that you betrayed me for money. I didn't betray you for money. I did it for my family. And what am I? Sean, am I not your family? Yes, you are my family, but Ellie and the children are my main responsibility now. So your main responsibility now is to steal from your mother. Sean put his hands on his head in frustration. Mom, you don't understand. We have huge expenses. The kids need private schools, clothes, vacations. I work day and night, but the money is never enough. And that's why you decided that I had to pay your bills with my life's work. You live alone in a small apartment. You don't need such a big beach house. It's a waste. There it was. The truth had finally emerged. Sean hadn't betrayed me out of love for his family. He had betrayed me because he thought I didn't deserve what I had worked my whole life to achieve. A waste, I repeated the word slowly, feeling its weight on my tongue. Mom, I didn't mean it in a bad way. My 30 years of working day and night are a waste. My discipline of saving every penny to build this house is a waste. My sacrifice of raising you alone after I was widowed is a waste. That's enough. Mom, Sean exploded. It's always the same with you, always reminding me of everything you sacrificed, always making me feel guilty for having my own life. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Ellie stopped packing to listen. There's the truth, I said with a calm that surprised me. You didn't betray me for money. You betrayed me because my sacrifices for you became a psychological burden you couldn't bear. I didn't say that. You didn't have to say it. You just screamed it. Sean stood there, breathing heavily, his face red with shame and anger. You know what the saddest thing about all this is? Son, if you had asked me for help directly, I would have helped you. If you had told me you were having financial problems, we would have found a solution together. But you preferred to conspire behind my back, humiliate me publicly, and try to rob me using the law. Why? Because I knew you would say no. How did you know if you never asked me? Because you've always been very attached to your money, very controlling with your life's work. Controlling Sean. I paid for your college. I bought your first car. I lent you the money for the down payment on your house. I helped you financially dozens of times in your adult life. Yes, but always with conditions. Always reminding me that it was your money. That it was your sacrifice. I finally understood everything. Sean hadn't betrayed me out of greed. He had betrayed me out of pride. His manly pride couldn't stand to continue being financially dependent on his old mother. You know something, Sean? You're right. I should have forced you to be more independent when you were younger. I should have let you solve your own problems instead of always rescuing you. But it's too late to change the past. And now you will have the chance to be completely independent because, from now on, you will solve all your financial problems without my help. William looked at his watch. Ladies and gentlemen, you have 10 minutes left. The final outburst was chaotic, Ellie screaming orders, the children crying, Sean carrying the last suitcases with an expression of total defeat. When they were finally all in their cars, Ellie rolled down her window and shouted one last threat. This isn't over, you bitter old woman. We're going to appeal. We're going to prove that you're crazy. Go ahead, I replied calmly. My lawyer will be waiting for you. The cars drove away, kicking up dust in my garage. Sean was the last to leave. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, but I had already turned my back on him. William approached. How are you feeling, Mrs. Brooks? Tired, I answered honestly. But free. Free from having to pretend we're a happy family. Free from having to excuse betrayal with motherly love. Free from pretending this can be fixed with forgiveness and forgetting. The officer said goodbye. The notary finished his documents. William handed me the keys to my own house. Mrs. Brooks, your house has been officially recovered. I walked up the steps of my terrace and sat in my favorite chair. For the first time in a week, I was alone in my own home. But the final act of this play was yet to come. That afternoon, I hired a professional cleaning service to erase all traces of the invasion. I paid $700 for 5 women to work all day, scrubbing every surface, washing every stain, rearranging every piece of furniture. While they cleaned, I walked through the house, cataloging the damage. In the living room, My beautiful embroidered cushions had been stained with red wine. In the master bathroom, I discovered that someone had spilled hair dye in the porcelain bathtub, leaving black stains that refused to come out even with strong products. In the kitchen, 2 of my French skillets were burned beyond repair, and in my garden, half of my plants had been trampled to death. But the worst of all were the personal items that disappeared forever. In addition to the jewelry, I noticed that my family photo album was gone, the one with Sean's childhood photos, my photos with my late husband, memories of decades of a life built with love and dedication. The wall clock my father gave me when I got married was also gone, an object of no great financial value, but of immense sentimental value. As I sat on the edge of my bed that night, I found myself thinking about Sean as a child. He had always been a sensitive boy, easily influenced by others. When Michael died, Sean was devastated. At 25, he still depended emotionally and financially on his father. I had to be both mother and father to him during that difficult time. Perhaps that's where I made my mistake in my desire to protect him, to make sure he didn't suffer financially as I had. I might have made him too dependent. I paid for his education, his first car, helped with the down payment on his house when he and Ellie got married. I was always there to solve his problems. But instead of gratitude, it seemed that my help had fostered resentment. The constant reminder that I was the one supporting him had wounded his pride as a man. And when Ellie came into his life ambitious, materialistic Ellie, she had found that weak point and exploited it masterfully. I remembered the day Sean introduced her to me, 5 years ago. She was beautiful, no doubt blonde hair perfectly styled, designer clothes, an expensive watch. But there was something cold in her eyes, something calculating in the way she looked at my house, my possessions, as if mentally appraising their value. "Mom, this is Ellie Price," Sean had said, with that puppy dog look of a man in love. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Brooks," she had said with a practiced smile. "Sean has told me so much about you." From the beginning, our relationship was cordial but distant. I tried to welcome her into the family, invited them for dinners, bought her thoughtful gifts, but nothing seemed to please her. She always had a criticism, a complaint, a way to make me feel that I wasn't doing enough. When they announced they were getting married after just 6 months of dating, I had my doubts but kept them to myself. It was Sean's life, his decision. I attended the wedding with a smile, gave them a generous check as a wedding gift, and wished them all the happiness in the world. But things changed after the wedding. Sean called less frequently. When they did visit, Ellie dominated the conversation, always talking about what they needed: a bigger apartment, a new car, private schools for the children they planned to have. And Sean just nodded, agreeing to everything she said. I saw my son changing gradually, becoming more materialistic, more concerned with appearances than with substance. When their first child, Sophia, was born 3 years ago, followed by Jake a year later, I hoped it would change their priorities, but it only seemed to accelerate their ambitions and spending. Last Christmas, when they visited me in Chicago, Ellie spent the entire dinner talking about her friends' vacation homes, their luxury cars, the private schools where they sent their children. I could see Sean becoming increasingly uncomfortable, stealing glances at me as if comparing his life to what I had achieved. "You're so lucky, Tiffany," Ellie had said with that false sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Living alone in that small apartment must save you so much money, and then you have this beautiful beach house that you barely use. It must be nice not to have to worry about children's expenses." I should have seen it then, the envy, the calculation, the seed of the plan that would culminate in the invasion of my home and the attempt to steal my property. But what hurt the most wasn't Ellie's actions. I had never expected loyalty or love from her. What broke my heart was Sean's betrayal, my only child, the boy I had raised alone, the man for whom I had sacrificed so much. How could he have become so weak, so easily manipulated, so willing to betray his own mother for money? As I contemplated these painful memories, I realized that the upcoming legal battle wouldn't just be about property and money. It would be about something much more profound: a mother's broken heart, a son's betrayal, a family torn apart by greed and resentment. With this realization came a clarity of purpose. Yes, I would fight with all legal means at my disposal to protect what was rightfully mine. But this wasn't just about winning in court. It was about standing up for myself, for my dignity, for the value of a lifetime of work and sacrifice. It was about showing Sean, Ellie, and the world that Tiffany Brooks would not be discarded, declared incompetent, or robbed of her life's achievements. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin, and I was ready for it. A week after the eviction, my house had regained its original peace. The strange smells were gone. The stains were mostly eliminated. My furniture was back in its proper place. But I knew that some things would never go back to normal. Betrayal leaves invisible scars that time cannot completely erase. That Monday morning, William Patterson called with updates on our legal actions. "Mrs. Brooks, I have good news. The judge has officially accepted our case against Sean and Ellie. The first hearing is scheduled for next Monday at 9:00 a.m. "That's excellent. William, what should I expect? They'll try to fight back. Of course, I've received notification that they've hired James Westbrook as their attorney. He's good aggressive, experienced, but also known for some questionable tactics." "Questionable in what way?" "He likes to attack the credibility of the opposing party, especially in cases involving senior citizens. He might try to create doubts about your mental competence, despite the lack of evidence." I sighed. The attack on my mental capacity wasn't just a legal strategy. It was a personal insult that struck at the core of my identity. All my life, I had prided myself on my independence, my clear thinking, my ability to manage my affairs without help from anyone. "Let them try," I said with determination. "I've managed my finances perfectly for decades. I built a business, paid off a mortgage, and maintained a property on my own. No judge will believe I suddenly became incompetent." "That's the spirit," William replied. "But we should prepare thoroughly. Can you come to my office tomorrow? We'll go through your financial records, property documents, and medical history to create a solid defense against any attempt to question your capacity." "I'll be there at 10:00 a.m. After hanging up, I sat on my terrace, watching the waves crash against the shore. The ocean had always had a calming effect on me. In its vastness and eternal rhythm, my personal problems seemed smaller, more manageable. But today, not even the ocean could fully calm the storm inside me. I took out my phone and looked at the photos I'd taken of the fraudulent documents. The words "deteriorating mental condition" stared back at me, mocking everything I had built and achieved. I remembered the humiliation of being called an old parasite in my own home, of having my belongings tossed into garbage bags, of discovering that my own son had participated in a scheme to steal my property. That night, I couldn't sleep. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too deep. I got up at 3:00 a.m. and sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea, planning my strategy. This wasn't just about defending myself legally. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my place in the world, my right to enjoy the fruits of my labor without being seen as a burden or an obstacle. By dawn, I had made a decision. I would not just defend myself. I would counterattack. I would use every legal means to ensure that Sean and Ellie faced the full consequences of their actions. Not out of revenge, but out of justice, because without consequences, there is no learning, no change, no deterrence for others who might consider similar actions against vulnerable seniors. At 10:00 a.m. the next day, I arrived at William's office with 3 large folders. The first contained all my financial records for the past 20 years' bank statements, tax returns, property taxes, and insurance payments. The second held all the legal documents related to my house, the deed, the mortgage paid in full, the property surveys, and the insurance policies. The third contained my medical records for the past decade annual checkups, prescription records, and a recent cognitive assessment I had requested from my doctor after discovering the fraudulent medical report. "I'm impressed," William said, reviewing the meticulously organized documents. "Most clients don't come this prepared." "I've spent my life being prepared." "William, it's how a widow survives in a world that often doesn't value older women." We spent the next 3 hours going through every document, creating a chronological timeline of my financial history, property ownership, and medical status. William nodded with approval as the picture of a mentally sharp, financially savvy, independent woman emerged from the paper trail. Mrs. Brooks, with these documents, no judge would question your capacity. Your financial management is impeccable. You've never missed a payment, never defaulted on a loan, never even carried a credit card balance. Your medical records show no cognitive decline whatsoever. In fact, your doctor specifically notes your exceptional mental clarity and memory for a patient of any age. So what's our strategy for the hearing? William leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming strategic. We'll play offense, not defense. Instead of just defending your capacity, we'll present evidence of their fraudulent activities. We'll focus on the falsified medical report, the unauthorized invasion of your property, the theft of your belongings, and the documented plan to transfer ownership through deception. What about the doctor who signed the false report? I've already filed a complaint with the medical board and provided evidence to the district attorney's office. He'll likely face separate charges for falsifying medical documents. If he's convicted, it will strengthen our case significantly. And the stolen jewelry and family albums. We've filed a police report. If they don't return the items before the hearing, it adds theft to their list of offenses. The judge won't look kindly on that. I nodded, feeling a sense of control returning. What about Sean? He'll claim he was just influenced by Ellie, that he wasn't really involved. William's expression hardened. The law doesn't recognize my wife made me do it as a valid defense. Mrs. Brooks, even if he was merely passive in this scheme, he was still complicit. His signature is on those fraudulent documents, and witnesses can place him at your house during the unauthorized occupation. As I was leaving William's office, he handed me a business card. This is Dr. Rebecca Chen, a geriatric psychiatrist. I'd like you to see her for a complete cognitive evaluation. Her assessment will be invaluable evidence of your mental capacity. Is that really necessary? My regular doctor has already confirmed I'm mentally sound. It is. James Westbrook will try to argue that your regular doctor is biased because of your long-standing relationship. An independent evaluation from a specialist will carry more weight with the judge. I took the card, understanding the strategy. I'll call her today. On my way home, I stopped at the bank to make another withdrawal. I had already paid William's retainer, but I knew from experience that legal battles could be expensive. As I waited in line, I saw a familiar face, Martha Price. Ellie's mother was at another teller's window. She saw me too, and her face paled. She quickly finished her transaction and hurried toward the exit, avoiding eye contact. But as she passed, I heard her mutter under her breath, "You'll regret this, old woman." I smiled to myself. The fact that they were already resorting to threats showed that they were worried. They had underestimated me once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. That afternoon, I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an evaluation for the following day. I then spent the evening preparing for the assessment, reviewing important dates and events in my life, practicing simple math calculations, and ensuring I could recall the names of current and past presidents, as these were common questions in cognitive evaluations. The next morning, Dr. Chen's office was quiet and professional. The evaluation lasted over 2 hours and included memory tests, problem-solving tasks, attention exercises, language assessments, and visual spatial evaluations. Dr. Chen was thorough but kind, explaining each test before administering it. When we finished, she smiled. "Mrs. Brooks, I don't usually discuss results immediately, but I can tell you that your performance was excellent across all cognitive domains. There is absolutely no evidence of any cognitive impairment." "Thank you, Doctor. How soon will your report be ready? We have a court hearing next Monday." "I'll have it ready by Friday. I'll send copies to both you and Mr. Patterson." As I was leaving the medical building, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Brooks, this is James Westbrook, representing your son Sean and his wife Ellie." The voice was smooth, practiced, with a hint of condescension that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Mr. Westbrook, I believe any communication should go through my attorney, William Patterson." "Normally, yes, but I thought you might want to discuss the possibility of a settlement before things get too adversarial. Family matters are always best resolved privately. Don't you think I disagree, Mr. Westbrook. When family members try to steal my property through fraud and deception, I prefer the protection of the legal system. He chuckled, a sound devoid of genuine amusement. Mrs. Brooks, litigation can be expensive, emotionally draining, and unpredictable. Sean and Ellie are prepared to return all your belongings and formally recognize your ownership of the Malibu property. In return, they simply ask that you drop the criminal complaints, so they can avoid the consequences of their actions. So the family can heal. Mrs. Brooks, do you really want to see your only son facing criminal charges? Think of your grandchildren. My grip on the phone tightened. Mr. Westbrook, my son and his wife thought I was mentally incompetent. They falsified medical documents. They invaded my home. They stole my belongings. They humiliated me. And now they want to heal the family. Healing requires justice, accountability, and genuine remorse, none of which I've seen from them. I understand your frustration, but you understand nothing, I interrupted, my voice steady despite my anger. Tell my son that if he wants to talk to me, he can do it in court. And tell his wife that the jewelry she stole better be returned before the hearing, or theft will be added to her list of charges. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking slightly with suppressed emotion. The call confirmed what I already suspected. They were getting nervous. The reality of potential criminal charges was finally sinking in, and they were looking for an escape route. Back at home, I found a large envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a formal notice from the court, confirming the hearing date and including copies of the motions filed by both legal teams. I sat on my terrace, reading through the documents carefully. James Westbrook's defense strategy was now clear. He was claiming that the entire incident was a misunderstanding, that Sean and Ellie had genuinely believed they had permission to use the house, that the property transfer documents were merely drafts for future estate planning discussions, and that the medical report was obtained in good faith based on concerns about my well-being. It was a clever but desperate attempt to reframe their actions in a more benign light. The problem was, I had evidence solid, documented evidence that contradicted every aspect of their defense. The evening before the hearing, Laura arrived from Phoenix to provide moral support. We sat on the terrace, watching the sunset and talking about our childhood, our parents, the values they had instilled in us. Do you remember Dad's favorite saying? Laura asked, sipping her tea. A person's word is their bond. Break your word. Break your bond. I nodded, feeling tears prick my eyes. He lived by that. Never promised what he couldn't deliver. Never backed out of a commitment. Sean used to be like that too, Laura said gently. What happened to him? Tiffany, I sighed deeply. I've been asking myself the same question. Maybe I protected him too much after Michael died. Maybe I didn't let him fail enough to learn resilience. Or maybe it's just Ellie's influence. She's ambitious in a way that leaves no room for principles. Are you ready for tomorrow? As ready as I'll ever be. William says our case is solid. We have the evidence, the documentation, the legal standing, but facing Sean in court. My voice trailed off. Laura reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing. Tiffany, sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. I nodded, grateful for her presence, for her unwavering support. Let's get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. The courthouse was imposing a massive stone building with wide steps and tall columns, a physical embodiment of the weight and authority of the law. William met us at the entrance, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, his briefcase full of our evidence. Good morning, Mrs. Brooks, Ms. Jenkins, he greeted us, using Laura's married name. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, adjusting my pearl necklace, a gift from Michael on our 25th wedding anniversary. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a tailored navy suit that conveyed respectability and seriousness, modest pearl earrings and low-heeled pumps. I wanted to project dignity, competence, and quiet confidence. As we climbed the steps, I saw them Sean, Ellie, and James Westbrook, huddled in conversation near the entrance. Ellie was dressed in a conservative beige suit, her usual flashy style toned down for the occasion. Sean looked pale and uncomfortable in a dark suit that seemed too tight around the collar. When they saw us approaching, Sean's expression flickered between shame and defiance. Ellie's face hardened into a mask of hostility. Westbrook, the consummate professional, merely nodded in acknowledgement before ushering his clients inside. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with dark wood paneling, rows of benches, and the imposing judge's bench at the front. We took our seats on the right side, while Sean, Ellie, and their lawyer sat on the left. I could feel Ellie's glare without having to look at her, but I kept my eyes forward, my posture straight. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Superior Court of Los Angeles County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Marianne Reynolds presiding." Judge Reynolds was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair cut in a practical bob, piercing blue eyes, and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. She reviewed the case files for a few moments before addressing the court. "This is case number 2025 CV 4872 Brooks v. Nelson and Price, concerning allegations of property invasion, attempted fraud, falsification of documents, and elder abuse. Am I correct in understanding that no settlement has been reached?" "That's correct, Your Honor," William responded, standing. "The plaintiff, Mrs. Tiffany Brooks, wishes to proceed with the case." "Very well," Judge Reynolds said. "Mr. Patterson, as the plaintiff's counsel, you may present your opening statement." William approached the podium, his demeanor calm and professional. "Your Honor, this case is about more than property rights or family disputes. It's about the systematic attempt to strip a competent, independent senior citizen of her legally owned property through deception, fraud, and abuse." He outlined our case methodically, presenting the timeline of events from the unauthorized occupation of my house to the discovery of the fraudulent property transfer documents and the falsified medical report. "The evidence will show that the defendants, Sean Nelson and Ellie Price, engaged in a calculated scheme to declare Mrs. Brooks mentally incompetent in order to transfer ownership of her $3.2 million Malibu beach house to themselves. They did this not out of concern for Mrs. Brooks' well-being, but out of greed and entitlement. They invaded her property without permission, damaged her belongings, stole valuable items, and when confronted, they attempted to gaslight Mrs. Brooks by suggesting she was mentally confused. When William finished, James Westbrook rose for the defense's opening statement. His approach was emotionally manipulative from the start. "Your Honor, at its heart, this is a sad case of family misunderstandings and poor communication, not the criminal conspiracy that Mr. Patterson has portrayed. Sean Nelson is a loving son who has always had his mother's best interests at heart. He and his wife, Ellie Price, genuinely believed they had Mrs. Brooks' implicit permission to use the beach house, a property that sat empty most of the year." Westbrook painted a picture of a concerned son worried about his aging mother, exploring options for future care and estate management rather than attempting fraud. He characterized the medical report as an unfortunate misunderstanding resulting from genuine concerns about Mrs. Brooks' increasing isolation and occasional memory lapses. It took every ounce of self-control not to react visibly to these blatant lies. William had warned me that showing anger or indignation could play into Westbrook's narrative about my emotional instability, so I maintained a composed expression throughout. After the opening statements, William called me as the first witness. As I took the stand and was sworn in, I looked directly at the judge, avoiding Sean's gaze. William led me through my testimony carefully, establishing my background, my financial history, the construction of the beach house, and then the events of the invasion and discovery of the fraudulent documents. I spoke clearly and calmly, presenting the facts without emotional embellishment. "Mrs. Brooks," William asked, "did you ever give your son Sean or his wife Ellie permission to occupy your beach house without your presence?" "No, never. They knew that I used that house regularly, especially on holiday weekends." "Did you ever express any intention to transfer ownership of the house to your son?" "No. While I have a will that leaves certain assets to Sean, I never discussed transferring the house during my lifetime." "Were you aware of any concerns about your mental capacity before discovering the fraudulent medical report?" "Absolutely not. I have regular checkups with my doctor, who has never indicated any cognitive issues. I still work part-time as a seamstress, manage my own finances, and live independently. William then presented the evidence photographs of the damage to my house, copies of the fraudulent property transfer documents, the falsified medical report, bank statements showing my impeccable financial management, and Dr. Chen's comprehensive cognitive evaluation confirming my full mental capacity. When it was Westbrook's turn for cross-examination, he approached with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Brooks, would you say you have a close relationship with your son? We had what I considered a close relationship until these events, and you've helped him financially throughout his adult life, correct? When he needed help, yes, I paid for his college education, helped with the down payment on his house, and provided other financial assistance over the years. So you've been controlling the purse strings, so to speak." William immediately objected. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is characterizing the witness's testimony." "Sustained," Judge Reynolds said firmly. "Mr. Westbrook, please stick to factual questions." Westbrook adjusted his approach. "Mrs. Brooks, isn't it true that you've expressed concern about your son's financial decisions in the past?" "I've expressed concern when I felt it was warranted." "Yes. And you've made your financial assistance conditional, haven't you? Based on whether you approved of his choices?" "I've never attached strings to help with necessities. I have declined to fund luxury purchases when Sean was already in debt." "So you have withheld financial support when you disapproved of his spending choices?" I looked directly at Westbrook. "I've exercised my right to decide how to use my own money." "Mr. Westbrook, that's not controlling. That's responsible financial management." A flicker of frustration crossed his face before he continued. "Mrs. Brooks, have you ever forgotten appointments, misplaced items, or had trouble remembering names?" "Like any human being, I occasionally forget things, but these are normal memory lapses that everyone experiences, not signs of cognitive decline." "And yet you didn't find it alarming that someone had created a medical report suggesting cognitive decline. Weren't you worried about your health?" "I was alarmed that someone had falsified a medical report, not about my cognitive health. I know my own mind, Mr. Westbrook, and so does my doctor, and now Dr. Chen as well." Westbrook tried several more angles to suggest that Sean and Ellie's actions were motivated by genuine concern rather than greed, that the property transfer documents were merely contingency planning, and that the occupation of my house was a misunderstanding rather than an invasion. I responded to each insinuation with calm facts, refusing to be baited into emotional responses. When I was finally allowed to step down, Laura squeezed my hand reassuringly. "You did great," she whispered. Next, William called Dr. Chen to testify about her cognitive evaluation. She was authoritative and professional, explaining in detail the comprehensive tests she had conducted and her findings. "Based on my extensive evaluation, Mrs. Brooks shows no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. In fact, her cognitive functions are above average for her age group in several domains, particularly executive function, memory, and problem-solving." Westbrook tried to suggest that cognitive decline could be situational or intermittent, but Dr. Chen firmly refuted this, citing the comprehensive nature of her testing and the consistency of Mrs. Brooks' performance across multiple cognitive domains. "In your professional opinion, Dr. Chen, is Mrs. Brooks capable of managing her financial affairs and property?" "Without a doubt, Mrs. Brooks demonstrates excellent judgment, reasoning, and memory, all essential components for financial management. There is absolutely no medical justification for questioning her capacity." After Dr. Chen, William called the notary public who had accompanied us during the eviction, who testified to the unauthorized occupation and the condition of the house. He then called a handwriting expert who confirmed that the signature on the falsified medical report did not match the doctor's actual signature. By mid-afternoon, our case was firmly established, backed by professional testimony and documented evidence. When court adjourned for the day, Judge Reynolds instructed us to return the following morning for the defense's case. As we were gathering our things to leave, I caught Sean looking at me from across the courtroom. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw something there, not defiance or anger, but a profound sadness and perhaps a flicker of shame. Then Ellie tugged at his arm, and he turned away. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the case by the public court filings. William had warned me this might happen and advised me to offer a brief, dignified statement if approached. "Mrs. Brooks, can you tell us about the allegations against your son?" a young woman with a microphone asked as we descended the courthouse steps. "This is a painful family matter that unfortunately requires legal resolution," I said simply. "I have faith in the justice system to uncover the truth." "Do you have any message for your son?" another reporter called out. I paused, considering my words carefully. "Only that actions have consequences, and that truth eventually comes to light." As we walked to William's car, I saw Sean and Ellie exiting the courthouse, surrounded by reporters. Ellie was pulling Sean along, her face set in a scowl, while Westbrook handled the press with practiced ease, offering no-comment platitudes. That evening, Laura and I had a quiet dinner at my house. Neither of us felt like discussing the case further, so we talked about her children, her garden in Phoenix, the book club she had recently joined Normal, everyday topics that momentarily took my mind off the pain of sitting in a courtroom, testifying against my own son. As we were clearing the dishes, my phone rang. It was William. "Mrs. Brooks, I've received some information you should know about. The doctor who supposedly signed the medical report has agreed to testify. He's admitting that he falsified the document in exchange for payment from Ellie Price. He's cooperating with the district attorney in hopes of leniency." My hand tightened on the phone. "What does this mean for our case?" "It significantly strengthens it. With his testimony, it will be virtually impossible for Sean and Ellie to maintain that they acted in good faith. The doctor's statement clearly establishes fraudulent intent." After hanging up, I shared the news with Laura. "This changes everything," she said. "They can't possibly win now." "It's not about winning, Laura," I said quietly. "It's about justice. And maybe, just maybe, about Sean finally seeing the truth about Ellie and about his own actions." That night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I found myself thinking not about the case or the testimony or the evidence, but about Sean as a little boy, his infectious laugh, his curious mind, his kind heart. Where had that boy gone? How had he transformed into a man who would betray his own mother for money, and for the first time since this ordeal began? I allowed myself to cry not from anger or humiliation, but from genuine grief for the son I had lost, not to death, but to greed, weakness, and the corrupting influence of a woman who valued possessions over people. The second day of the hearing began with an unexpected development. As William, Laura, and I entered the courtroom, we saw only James Westbrook at the defense table. Sean and Ellie were nowhere to be seen. When Judge Reynolds entered and court was called to session, she immediately noticed their absence. "Mr. Westbrook, where are your clients?" Westbrook rose, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Your Honor, I've been informed that Mrs. Price is experiencing severe anxiety and has been prescribed medication by her doctor. Mr. Nelson is staying home to care for her and their children." Judge Reynolds' expression hardened. "Mr. Westbrook, this court does not look kindly on parties who file legal responses and then fail to appear for their hearings, unless Mrs. Price is currently hospitalized. I expect both defendants to be present within the hour, or I will consider ruling summarily in favor of the plaintiff." "Your Honor, I understand, but 1 hour? Mr. Westbrook, this court will recess until 10:00 a.m. If your clients are not present at that time, I will proceed accordingly." As we waited in this corridor during the recess, William was quietly confident. "This is a significant misstep on their part. Judges hate when parties try to delay proceedings through last-minute absences. It suggests a lack of respect for the court and a weak case." "Do you think they'll show up?" Laura asked. "They'll have to. Westbrook won't want to lose by default, and he'll make that very clear to them." Sure enough, at precisely 9:58 a.m., Sean and Ellie hurried into the courthouse. Ellie looked pale but composed, without any visible signs of the severe anxiety Westbrook had claimed. Sean looked tired and defeated, as if he hadn't slept. When court reconvened, Judge Reynolds addressed them directly. "Mr. Nelson, Mrs. Price, I'm glad you could join us. This court's time is valuable, and I expect all parties to respect that. Mr. Westbrook, you may proceed with your defense." Westbrook called Sean as his first witness. As Sean took the stand, he avoided looking in my direction, keeping his eyes either on Westbrook or on the floor. Mr. Nelson, can you describe your relationship with your mother? Sean cleared his throat nervously. She raised me alone after my father died. She worked hard to provide for me, paid for my education, helped me get started in life. And in recent years, how would you characterize your relationship? It's been strained at times. Mom has always been very independent, very strong-willed. Sometimes she can be controlling with her money, with her opinions. Did you ever discuss the possibility of your mother transferring her beach house to you? Sean shifted uncomfortably. Not directly, no. But she had mentioned several times that someday the house would be mine, that she was keeping it in the family. And what led to your decision to stay at the beach house that weekend? Ellie and we've been having financial difficulties. Private school tuition for the kids, mortgage payments, car loans. We couldn't afford a vacation, and the beach house was just sitting empty most of the time. We thought Mom wouldn't mind if we used it. Did you intend to take ownership of the house without your mother's consent? Sean hesitated, visibly conflicted. No, not exactly. The documents, they were just a contingency plan. Ellie was worried about what would happen to the house if Mom's health declined. We wanted to make sure it stayed in the family. And the medical report, did you believe your mother was experiencing cognitive decline? Again, Sean hesitated. Mom has been more forgetful lately. She sometimes misplaces things, repeats stories. Nothing serious. But Ellie was concerned. She suggested we should have Mom evaluated, just to be safe. Did you authorize or pay for a fraudulent medical report? No, Ellie handled that part. She said she found a doctor who could assess Mom based on the behaviors we'd observed. I didn't know the doctor hadn't actually examined her. I watched as Sean tried to walk the impossible line between admitting wrongdoing and shifting blame to Ellie. It was painful to witness. This dance of half-truths and omissions from a son I had raised to be honest and straightforward. When it was William's turn to cross-examine, he approached with confident precision. Mr. Nelson, you testified that you thought your mother wouldn't mind if you used her house. Did you call her to ask permission? No, I didn't. Did you text her email, her leave a note? No. In fact, you made no attempt whatsoever to obtain your mother's consent before occupying her property. Did you? Not directly, no. Mr. Nelson, you testified that your mother has been more forgetful lately. Can you provide specific examples of serious memory lapses that would justify a diagnosis of dementia? Sean squirmed in his seat. Well, she sometimes forgets small details of conversations we've had. She's misplaced her keys a few times. Once she forgot my son's baseball game. Mr. Nelson, are you aware that these examples describe normal memory variations that virtually everyone experiences, regardless of age? I guess so, yes. Are you aware that a diagnosis of dementia requires significant cognitive impairment that interferes with daily functioning, not merely forgetting keys or a baseball game? I'm not a doctor. Indeed, yet you were willing to accept a medical diagnosis from a doctor who never examined your mother, based solely on these trivial examples. Isn't that correct? Sean looked down. I trusted Ellie's judgment. Mr. Nelson, when your mother arrived at her own house and found you and your wife's family occupying it without permission, did you come to her defense when your wife called her an old parasite? Sean's face flushed with shame. No, I wasn't there when that happened. But you were informed about it afterward. Correct. Yes. And what did you do then? Did you apologize to your mother? Did you ask your wife to apologize? No. In fact, you continued to participate in the unauthorized occupation of your mother's house, even after knowing she had been insulted and humiliated on her own property. Didn't you? Yes. Mr. Nelson, I have here the property transfer documents that were found in your mother's secret closet. Your signature appears on page 3. Did you sign these documents? Sean hesitated, then nodded. Yes. And these documents falsely claim that your mother is mentally incompetent. Do they not? That's what they say, yes. Mr. Nelson, by your own admission, you signed legal documents falsely declaring your mother mentally incompetent. You participated in the unauthorized occupation of her property, and you did nothing to defend her when she was insulted and humiliated. How do you reconcile these actions with your claim that you care about your mother's well-being? Sean had no answer. He sat silently, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on his hands. After Sean, Westbrook called Ellie to the stand. Unlike Sean, she appeared confident, even defiant, meeting my gaze directly with a challenging stare before taking the oath. Westbrook led her through a carefully constructed narrative that portrayed her as a concerned daughter-in-law worried about an aging mother-in-law's well-being. A narrative that completely contradicted the evidence and Sean's own hesitant testimony. Mrs. Price, what motivated your concern about Mrs. Brooks' cognitive health? I noticed changes in her behavior over the past year: increased irritability, confusion about dates and appointments, reluctance to engage socially. These are warning signs of cognitive decline that I've read about. And the beach house visit, what was the purpose of that? We wanted to check on the property, make sure everything was in order. Tiffany rarely visits it, and properties need regular maintenance. We brought family along because we thought it would be a good opportunity for a short vacation while performing this service for her. Did you intend to take possession of the house permanently? Absolutely not. We were just using it temporarily, with the understanding that it would eventually be Sean's inheritance anyway. The documents were simply preparatory, in case Tiffany's condition worsened and she could no longer manage the property. Her lies were so brazen, so contrary to the documented evidence and even her husband's testimony, that I had to focus on keeping my expression neutral. William had warned me not to react visibly, as it could distract the judge from Ellie's inconsistencies. When William cross-examined Ellie, he was methodical and relentless. Mrs. Price, you testified that Mrs. Brooks shows signs of cognitive decline. Are you a medical professional? No, but I've read about the warning signs. Have you ever been present during Mrs. Brooks' medical appointments? No. Did you consult with her actual physician before obtaining this supposed medical assessment? No, that would have violated her privacy. Yet you didn't consider it a violation of her privacy to obtain a fraudulent medical report about her mental state without her knowledge or consent. Ellie shifted uncomfortably. We were concerned about her. Mrs. Price, I have here bank records showing a payment of $2,000 from your personal account to Dr. Harold Jenkins on May 15th of this year. Dr. Jenkins is the doctor whose signature appears on the fraudulent medical report. Can you explain this payment? Ellie's confidence visibly faltered. That was a consultation fee for his professional opinion. A consultation fee for a medical opinion on a patient he never examined. Isn't it true, Mrs. Price, that this was payment for a falsified medical report? No, that's not Mrs. Price. Dr. Jenkins has provided a sworn statement to the district attorney that you paid him to falsify a dementia diagnosis for Mrs. Brooks without ever examining her. Are you disputing his sworn testimony? Ellie's face drained of color. She looked desperately toward Westbrook, who remained impassive, knowing he had no legal ground to object to this line of questioning. I was just trying to protect our family's interests. By committing fraud, by falsifying medical documents, by attempting to declare a perfectly competent woman mentally incompetent so you could take her property. It's not that simple. I believe it is that simple, Mrs. Price. One final question. When Mrs. Brooks arrived at her own house and you called her an old parasite, were you acting out of concern for her well-being? Ellie had no answer. Her carefully constructed narrative completely unraveled by the weight of evidence and her own contradictions. As the defense concluded its case, it was clear even to the most casual observer that their position was untenable. The combination of documented evidence, professional testimony, and the defendant's own conflicting statements had created an overwhelming case in my favor. In his closing argument, William was forceful but dignified. Your Honor, the evidence presented in this court clearly establishes that the defendants engaged in a calculated scheme to deprive Mrs. Brooks of her rightfully owned property through fraud, deception, and elder abuse. They invaded her home without permission, damaged her property, stole her belongings, and attempted to have her declared mentally incompetent based on a falsified medical report that they purchased for $2,000. These actions constitute not merely a family disagreement, but serious legal violations that warrant both civil and criminal consequences. Westbrook's closing argument was notably brief. focusing primarily on mitigating factors rather than disputing the core allegations. Your Honor, while my clients acknowledge errors in judgment, their actions were motivated by genuine financial strain and concerns about family security, not malice. We ask the court to consider the family context of this dispute and to favor reconciliation over punishment. Judge Reynolds listened attentively to both arguments before addressing the court. I will review all evidence and testimony presented and deliver my ruling tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. Court is adjourned until then. As we left the courtroom, I felt emotionally drained but resolute. The truth had been laid bare, not just for the judge, but for Sean and Ellie themselves. They could no longer hide behind excuses or rationalizations. They had to face the reality of what they had done, and soon, the consequences of their actions. That night, back at my beach house, Laura and I sat on the terrace watching the sunset. The beauty of the ocean view stood in stark contrast to the ugliness of the day's revelations. "What do you think will happen tomorrow?" Laura asked. "William believes the judge will rule in our favor, possibly with significant damages awarded. And the criminal charges, those will proceed separately. The district attorney will decide whether to pursue charges based on the evidence." Laura sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Are you prepared for what this might do to Sean? To your relationship with him?" I looked out at the darkening ocean. "The relationship I thought we had is already gone. Laura, it disappeared the moment he signed those fraudulent papers. What happens next depends on him whether he can acknowledge what he's done, take responsibility for it, and begin to rebuild trust. But that's his journey, not mine. And Ellie, I don't think there's any coming back from what she's done. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal." As darkness fell over the ocean, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. Whatever tomorrow brought, I had stood up for myself, for my dignity, for the truth. I had refused to be a victim, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my property but my power. The courtroom was silent as Judge Reynolds took her seat the next morning. Her expression was serious, her manner deliberate. I sat at our table with William and Laura, hands folded in my lap to hide their slight trembling. Across the aisle, Sean and Ellie sat with Westbrook, both looking tired and tense. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony presented in this case," Judge Reynolds began, "I am prepared to deliver my ruling." She looked down at her notes for a moment before continuing. "The evidence clearly establishes that the defendants, Sean Nelson and Ellie Price, engaged in an orchestrated attempt to deprive the plaintiff, Tiffany Brooks, of her legally owned property through fraudulent means. They occupied her home without permission, caused damage to her property, and attempted to have her declared mentally incompetent based on a falsified medical report they purchased for the explicit purpose of transferring her property into their names." Judge Reynolds's gaze moved between Sean and Ellie, her expression stern. "These actions constitute not merely a family disagreement, but serious violations of both civil and criminal law. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts." I felt Laura's hand squeeze mine under the table, but I kept my expression neutral, focusing on the judge's words. "The defendants are hereby ordered to pay damages in the amount of $50,000 for property damage, emotional distress, and legal fees. Additionally, the court is issuing a restraining order prohibiting the defendants from entering the plaintiff's Malibu property without explicit written permission. The court is also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to the falsification of medical documents, attempted fraud, and elder abuse." Judge Reynolds paused, removing her glasses and looking directly at Sean and Ellie. "I feel compelled to add a personal note. In my years on the bench, I have seen many family disputes over property and inheritance. But the calculated nature of this attempt to strip Mrs. Brooks of her rights and property is particularly disturbing. Mr. Nelson and Mrs. Price, you have violated not just the law but the fundamental trust between parent and child, between family members. I would strongly encourage both of you to reflect deeply on your actions and their consequences." She replaced her glasses and continued in her official capacity. "This court is adjourned. My written ruling will be filed by the end of the day." As the judge left the courtroom, I remained seated, absorbing the full impact of the ruling. It wasn't just the financial damages or the restraining order, though those were significant. It was the validation, the formal, legal confirmation that I had been wronged, that my feelings of betrayal and violation were justified, that I had every right to defend myself and seek justice. William leaned toward me. "This is a complete victory, Mrs. Brooks." The judge couldn't have been clearer in her condemnation of their actions. I nodded, still processing the moment. What happens now with the potential criminal charges? The district attorney will review the evidence and decide whether to proceed. Given the clear evidence of falsified medical documents and the doctor's cooperation, they likely have a strong case. If they do proceed, Sean and Ellie could face additional fines and potentially even jail time, though first-time offenders often receive probation. Across the aisle, Ellie was speaking animatedly to Westbrook, her face flushed with anger. Sean sat silently, staring at his hands, a picture of defeat. As we gathered our belongings to leave, Sean suddenly stood and approached our table. Westbrook reached out to stop him, but Sean brushed his hand away. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Can I talk to you?" "Please." I looked at him, this man who was my son but who had become a stranger. Part of me wanted to refuse, to turn away as he had turned away when I needed him. But another part, the part that remembered him as a small boy with skinned knees and trusting eyes, couldn't deny him this moment. "5 minutes, I said. In the hallway, William looked concerned. "Mrs. Brooks, I advise against any private conversations without legal representation." "It's all right, William. The case is decided. I'll be fine." Laura touched my arm. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, thank you. This is between Sean and me." In the quiet corridor outside the courtroom, Sean and I stood facing each other, a gulf of betrayal and hurt between us. He looked older than his 45 years, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders hunched with the weight of his actions. "I don't know what to say," he began, his voice low. "I'm sorry seems completely inadequate." "It is," I agreed. "But it would still be a start. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything, for letting Ellie push me into this, for not standing up for you, for being so weak and greedy." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm ashamed." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd seen so often from him recently, but I saw only genuine remorse and deep shame. "Why, Sean? That's what I can't understand. Why would you do this to me? I've always helped you when you needed it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from his childhood that it made my heart ache. "It started with money problems. We've been living beyond our means for years, the private schools, the vacations, the cars. Ellie always wants more, always compares us to her friends who have bigger houses, better cars, more expensive vacations. I kept taking on more debt, trying to make her happy. And my house became the solution. Not at first. It started with just using it for vacations to save money. Then Ellie started talking about how unfair it was that you had this beautiful beach house sitting empty most of the time while we struggled to make mortgage payments. She said it didn't make sense for an old woman living alone to have such a valuable property when it could benefit the whole family. His words stung, even knowing they originated with Ellie. "And you agreed with her assessment of this old woman." "No, I mean, I didn't think of it that way. She made it sound reasonable that it was just accelerating the inevitable, that someday the house would be mine anyway. So why not now when we needed it? I knew it was wrong. But I was desperate. And Ellie kept pushing, saying it was for the children, for their future. The medical report was for the children's future, too." He winced visibly. "That was Ellie's idea. She found the doctor, arranged everything. I knew about it, though I didn't stop it. I signed the papers. I'm not trying to blame her for everything. I made my own choices. Terrible choices." I was silent for a moment, processing his words. There was truth in them, but also continuing deflection. He was owning his actions while still placing the initiative, the driving force, on Ellie. "What happens now, Sean, with you and Ellie?" He looked down, his expression pained. I don't know. This whole thing has shown me a side of her I can't unsee. The way she talked about you, the things she was willing to do for money. It's like I'm finally seeing clearly after years of being blind. But there are the children to think about. Yes, there are, I agreed. Sophia and Jake deserve better than what they've witnessed these past weeks. I miss you, Mom, he said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. The kids miss you. Whatever happens between me and Ellie, I hope someday you can be part of our lives again. I felt tears threatening but held them back. This wasn't the time for an emotional reconciliation. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken. That will take time, Sean, a lot of time. And real change. Not just words. He nodded, understanding the boundary I was setting. I know. I just wanted to say it. As we stood there in the courthouse corridor, I realized that this was not an ending, but a beginning, the beginning of a long, difficult process of accountability, change, and, perhaps someday, healing. You should go, I said gently. Ellie is waiting for you. He glanced back toward the courtroom door, his expression conflicted. Yeah, take care of yourself. Mom, I always have. Sean, I always will. I watched him walk away, his steps heavy, his shoulders bowed. Despite everything, a part of my heart ached for him, for the good person I believed still existed somewhere beneath the layers of weakness, greed, and poor choices. Laura was waiting for me near the courthouse exit. Are you okay? She asked, her eyes full of concern. I will be, I said. Let's go home. In the weeks following the court ruling, I threw myself into restoring my home and my peace of mind. I replaced the damaged furniture, replanted the trampled garden, and installed a new security system. The physical repairs were straightforward. The emotional ones would take much longer. One afternoon, as I was tending to my newly planted geraniums, William called with an update. Mrs. Brooks, I have news from the district attorney's office. They've decided to proceed with criminal charges against both Sean and Ellie for falsification of medical documents and attempted fraud. The doctor has agreed to testify in exchange for leniency, and the evidence is overwhelming. I sat down on the garden bench, feeling the weight of this development. What kind of penalties might they face? For first-time offenders, likely probation, community service, and additional fines. Jail time is possible, but less common in cases like this where no physical harm occurred. Ellie, as the primary instigator who directly paid for the falsified documents, may face stricter penalties than Sean. I see, I said quietly. When will this proceed? They've been formally charged. Arraignment is scheduled for next week. After that, there will likely be negotiations for a plea deal, given the strength of the evidence against them. After hanging up, I sat in my garden for a long time, watching the waves break against the shore. I had wanted justice, had fought for it, and now it was unfolding with an inexorable momentum of its own. The system I had invoked was working as intended, holding Sean and Ellie accountable for their actions. Yet I found no joy in it, only a somber satisfaction that truth had prevailed. That evening, Laura called from Phoenix. How are you holding up, Tiffany? I'm doing all right. The house is coming back to life. The new security system is installed. I'm moving forward. And emotionally, I sighed. That's more complicated. William called today. Criminal charges are proceeding against Sean and Ellie. How do you feel about that? Conflicted. They need to face consequences for what they did, but I take no pleasure in seeing my son in legal trouble, in knowing my grandchildren's parents might have criminal records. Have you heard anything from Sean since the hearing? Not directly. He sent a package last week, my mother's jewelry, the family albums, all the items they had taken. There was a note saying simply, I'm sorry. These should never have been taken from you. That's something, at least, Laura said. A small step, yes, but a step toward what our relationship is fundamentally broken. Laura, I don't know if it can ever be repaired. Time will tell. People can change when faced with the consequences of their actions. Maybe this will be Sean's wake-up call. After we hung up, I took out the family albums that Sean had returned. I spent the evening looking through them pictures of Sean as a baby, as a toddler taking his first steps, as a young boy riding his first bicycle, as a teenager in his graduation cap and gown. So many memories, so much love and sacrifice invested in raising him. One photo in particular caught my attention, Sean at about 7 years old, sitting on his father's shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing in the sunlight. It was taken just a few miles from where my house now stood, during one of our rare family vacations when Michael was still alive. I remembered that day clearly, the joy in Michael's eyes as he played with his son, the contentment I felt watching them together, the sense that despite our financial struggles, we were rich in what truly mattered. Where had it all gone wrong? Had I spoiled Sean after Michael's death, trying to compensate for his loss? Had I made him too dependent, too entitled in? Or was it simply the influence of Ellie, her materialism and ambition corrupting his better nature? Perhaps it was all of these things, a complex tapestry of causes and effects that had led to this painful outcome. Understanding the reasons didn't lessen the hurt, but it did help me see that this tragedy had many authors, myself included. The next morning, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang just after 10:00 a.m., and I opened it to find Sophia, my 11-year-old granddaughter, standing on my doorstep. She was alone, clutching her backpack, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. "Sophia, what are you doing here? How did you get here?" "I took an Uber." "Grandma," she said, as if this were the most normal thing in the world for a child her age. "I saved my allowance for 2 weeks." I ushered her inside, concerned and a little alarmed. "Does your father know you're here? Your mother?" She shook her head. "No. They're fighting all the time now. Dad sleeps in the guest room. Mom cries a lot and then gets really angry. I had to see you." My heart ached for her. Children always bear the collateral damage of adult conflicts, and Sophia was clearly suffering from the fallout of her parents' actions and their consequences. "Let me call your father so he doesn't worry," I said, reaching for my phone. "Wait," Sophia said, placing her small hand on mine. "Can we talk first, please?" There was such earnestness in her eyes, such need, that I couldn't refuse. "All right, let's sit on the terrace. Would you like some hot chocolate?" She nodded, a small smile brightening her face. "With marshmallows." "I think I can manage that." A few minutes later, we were sitting on the terrace, mugs of hot chocolate in hand, the ocean spread before us like a glittering tapestry. "I miss you, Grandma," Sophia said simply. "And I'm sorry for what Mom and Dad did. It wasn't right." "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart," I said gently. "None of this is your fault. I know, but I still feel bad and confused. Dad said they have to go to court again because they broke the law. He said they might get in big trouble." I chose my words carefully, trying to be honest without adding to her burden. "Your parents made some serious mistakes. Sophia, there are consequences for those mistakes, just like when you do something wrong at school. But they're still your parents, and they still love you very much. Dad says he's really sorry. He cries sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking." "I believe he is sorry," I said, finding that I genuinely meant it. Sometimes adults make bad decisions, especially when they're worried about money or trying to impress others. But making bad decisions doesn't make someone a bad person. Sophia looked at me with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see more than an 11-year-old should. "Is that why you're not talking to Dad anymore, because of the bad decisions? Not because you don't love him?" The question pierced straight to my heart. "That's very insightful. Sophia, yes, I still love your father. He's my son, just like you're his daughter. That love doesn't disappear because of bad decisions. But trust can be broken, and it takes time to rebuild it. Like when Jake broke my tablet and then lied about it," she said, nodding with the wisdom of a child who had already learned about trust and betrayal in her own small way. "I was really mad at him for a long time. But then he saved his allowance and bought me a new case for it. And he promised never to touch my stuff without asking again." "That's a good example," I said, smiling at her simple yet profound understanding. Sometimes it takes more than just saying sorry. It takes actions that show you've really changed and understand what you did wrong. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, Sophia sipping her hot chocolate and looking out at the ocean, seemingly processing our conversation in her thoughtful way. "Grandma," she said finally, "could Jake and I come visit you sometimes, even if Mom and Dad can't?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't considered the possibility of maintaining a relationship with my grandchildren separate from their parents. But looking at Sophia's hopeful face, I knew I couldn't shut them out of my life because of their parents' actions. "I would like that very much," I said. "But we'd need your parents' permission. It's not right for you to come here without them knowing. Like today. They must be very worried about you right now." As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Sean, his voice frantic. "Mom, I'm sorry to bother you, but Sophia is missing. We've checked with all her friends, and no one's seen her. I'm calling everyone she might have gone to." "She's here with me, Sean," I said calmly. "She took an Uber to my house." His relief was audible. "Oh, thank God. I've been out of my mind with worry. Is she okay?" "She's fine. We're having hot chocolate on the terrace." There was a pause. Then, "Mom, I'm so sorry about this. I had no idea she would do something like this." "She's a resourceful girl," I said, feeling a hint of pride in my granddaughter's determination. "But she shouldn't be taking Ubers alone at her age. I'll keep her here until you can come pick her up." "I'll leave right now," he said. "Thank you, Mom, for looking after her, for everything." After hanging up, I told Sophia that her father was on his way. "He was very worried about you." "Am I in trouble?" she asked, looking slightly apprehensive. "I think he'll be too relieved to be angry," I said. "But you should understand that what you did was dangerous. There are safer ways to arrange a visit with your grandmother." She nodded solemnly. "I know. I just really wanted to see you, and I was afraid you might say no if I called first." I put my arm around her small shoulders. "I would never say no to seeing you. Sophia, you and Jake are always welcome here, as long as your parents know where you are." We spent the next hour walking along the beach, collecting shells and talking about school, friends, and the latest books she was reading. It was a precious interlude of normalcy in the midst of the family turmoil, a reminder of the innocent lives caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts. When Sean arrived, his face showed the strain of the past week's new lines around his eyes, a certain haggardness to his features that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. He stood awkwardly at the door, clearly unsure of his welcome. "Come in, Sean," I said, stepping aside. "Sophia is in the kitchen, finishing her lunch." He entered hesitantly, looking around at the house with a mixture of shame and nostalgia. "The place looks good. You fixed everything up." "Most things can be repaired with enough time and care," I said, the statement hanging between us with its double meaning. In the kitchen, Sophia was eating a sandwich, her legs swinging under the counter stool. When she saw her father, she jumped down and ran to him. "Dad, don't be mad. I just wanted to see Grandma." Sean knelt and embraced her. I was worried sick. "Soph, you can't just disappear like that. Anything could have happened to you." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "But I'm okay. Grandma took care of me." Sean looked up at me over Sophia's head, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. She's my granddaughter," I said simply. After Sophia had gathered her things and used the bathroom before the drive home, Sean and I had a moment alone. "How are things?" "Sean," I asked, not out of politeness, but genuine concern. He sighed heavily. "Difficult. Ellie and we're not in a good place. The legal bills have been enormous, and now with the criminal charges..." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "I've moved into the guest room. We're trying to keep it together for the kids. But I don't know if we can..." I nodded, unsurprised. "And the criminal case? Our lawyer thinks we should take a plea deal. Probation, community service, fines. Ellie's fighting it. She wants to go to trial, but the evidence is overwhelming. I just want it to be over." He hesitated, then added, "I've started seeing a therapist, trying to understand how I ended up here, how I could have betrayed you like this." This surprised me. Sean had always dismissed therapy as pointless talk, even when I'd suggested it after his father's death. That's a positive step. It's helping. Slowly. I have a lot to work through. An awkward silence fell between us, filled with all the things left unsaid, all the hurt and betrayal that couldn't be erased with a single conversation. "Mom," Sean said finally, "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but Sophia and Jake, they miss you. They don't understand why they can't see their grandmother anymore. Would it be possible?" "They're always welcome here, Sean," I said. "They shouldn't suffer for adult mistakes. We can arrange visits supervised at first, until trust is rebuilt." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you. That means a lot." He hesitated, then added, "And maybe, someday, you and I could—" "One step at a time, Sean," I said gently but firmly. "Some journeys can't be rushed." He nodded, accepting this boundary. "Fair enough." As they were leaving, Sophia hugged me tightly. "I'll come back soon, Grandma. Properly next time. With permission." "I'll look forward to it," I said, kissing the top of her head. Watching them drive away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, cautious hope for what might still be salvaged, and a deep love for my granddaughter who had been brave enough to bridge the divide between us. A month later, I found myself back in the courthouse for the criminal case arraignment. I hadn't planned to attend, but William advised that my presence might influence the proceedings. "The judge will take into account the victim's perspective," he explained. "If you're there, it shows that you take these offenses seriously, but it also suggests you're engaged with the process rather than seeking maximum punishment out of vindictiveness." The courtroom was smaller this time, more austere. Sean and Ellie sat with their criminal defense attorney, a different lawyer than Westbrook. Sean looked nervous but composed. Ellie appeared tense, her jaw set in a rigid line. The charges were read: falsification of medical documents, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The severity of the accusations, spoken aloud in the formal language of the law, cast a palpable weight over the proceedings. When asked how they pleaded, both Sean and Ellie said not guilty, though Sean's voice wavered slightly. This was a formality. William had explained to me most defendants initially plead not guilty while plea negotiations continue behind the scenes. After the arraignment, in the courthouse corridor, Sean approached me alone. Ellie watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. "Mom," he said quietly, "I want you to know I'm going to change my plea to guilty. My lawyer is working on a plea agreement now. I'm not going to keep pretending what we did wasn't wrong." I was surprised by this direct acknowledgement. "What about Ellie?" He glanced back at his wife. "She wants to fight it. Says we can claim we were genuinely concerned about your health, that we were misled by the doctor. But I'm done with the lies. I can't look my children in the eye and keep denying what we did." This was the first sign of real moral courage I'd seen from Sean in a long time. "I think that's a wise decision, Sean, not just legally, but for your peace of mind and your relationship with the children." He nodded. "The plea deal will probably include probation, community service, and a fine, and a permanent criminal record." He said the last part with a grimace, the full implications clearly weighing on him. "It's a high price," I acknowledged. "But sometimes that's what it takes to learn the hardest lessons." "Yeah," he said softly. "Listen, Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about why I went along with it all. It wasn't just Ellie's influence or financial pressure. It was resentment, I guess. All my life, you've been so strong, so self-sufficient. You built a business, bought a house, managed everything on your own. And I've always needed help, always been dependent. Part of me wanted to prove I could provide for my family without your help, that I could give them the security and comfort you gave me. But when I couldn't, when the debts piled up, that resentment turned ugly." His honesty was unexpected and affecting. For the first time, I felt I was hearing the real Sean, not the one trying to justify his actions or shift blame. "We all have our strengths and weaknesses. Sean," I said gently, Your father wasn't great with money either, but he was kind and loving and hardworking. You inherited his best qualities. Somewhere along the way, you started measuring your worth by material success rather than character. The therapist says something similar, he admitted with a small, self-deprecating smile. Says I've been trying to prove my worth through possessions and status, trying to fill the void left by Dad's death with material things. It's a common trap, I said. One I've seen many people fall into. The good news is, you can climb out of it. I'm trying. For the kids, if nothing else, they deserve better than what I've been. As we spoke, I noticed Ellie watching us with increasing agitation. Finally, she approached, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Sean, we need to go, she said, not acknowledging my presence. Our lawyer wants to discuss strategy. Sean looked at her, then back at me, caught between his past and his potential future. I'll be there in a minute. Ellie? Now, Sean, she insisted, her voice sharp. Unless you want to keep undermining our defense with all this guilty conscience nonsense. I saw something shift in Sean's expression, a hardening, a resolve I hadn't witnessed before. You can go ahead. I'm having a conversation with my mother. Ellie's face flushed with anger. Fine. Throw away our future. See if I care. She turned and stalked away, her posture rigid with fury. Sean watched her go, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face. Things have been tense since the civil trial. I can see that, I said. What will you do? He sighed deeply. I don't know yet. The kids are my priority right now. Getting through this legal situation, providing stability for them. He hesitated, then added, Sophia talks about you all the time. You know, says you're the strongest person she knows because you stood up for yourself even against your own family. This touched me deeply. She's a remarkable girl, very perceptive. She gets that from you, Sean said with a small smile. Mom, would it be okay if I brought the kids to visit this weekend, just them and me? No Ellie. I'd like that, I said, surprised to find how much I meant it. As Sean walked away to join his wife and lawyer, I realized that something fundamental had shifted between us. The breach wasn't healed far from it, but a tentative bridge was being built, one honest conversation at a time. 3 weeks later, the district attorney's office reached plea agreements with both Sean and Ellie. Sean pleaded guilty to falsification of documents and attempted fraud. Ellie pleaded guilty to the same charges plus conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Sean received 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. Ellie received 3 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and a $25,000 fine. Both would have permanent criminal records, though they avoided jail time as first-time offenders. When William called to tell me the news, he seemed satisfied with the outcome. This is about as severe as it gets for first-time offenders in non-violent cases. The judge took into account the premeditated nature of their actions and the particular vulnerability of the victim. As a senior citizen, Ellie received a harsher sentence because the evidence showed she was the primary instigator. Thank you for keeping me informed, William, I said. I hope this brings the legal chapter to a close. It should. Both have accepted their sentences without appeal. Of course, they'll still be dealing with the consequences for years to come, the probation, the community service, the financial impact, not to mention the difficulty of finding certain types of employment with fraud convictions on their records. After hanging up, I sat on my terrace, contemplating the ocean and the journey of the past few months. Justice had been served, both civil and criminal. The legal system had validated my experience and imposed appropriate consequences. Yet there was no sense of triumph, no feeling of vindication, only a somber recognition that actions have consequences, and some wounds leave permanent scars. The true victory, I realized, wasn't in the court judgments or the financial penalties. It was in having stood up for myself, in refusing to be victimized, in demonstrating to my grandchildren that age does not diminish one's right to dignity and respect. That was a legacy worth preserving. Over the next 6 months, a new pattern emerged in our fractured family. Sean brought Sophia and Jake to visit me every other weekend. These visits were initially awkward. with Sean clearly uncomfortable in the house that had been at the center of so much conflict. But the children's natural enthusiasm and resilience gradually eased the tension, creating pockets of genuine warmth and connection. Ellie never accompanied them. I heard through Sean that she was deeply bitter about the criminal conviction, blaming everyone but herself for the outcome. She had started working longer hours at her real estate job, seemingly throwing herself into her career as an escape from her personal problems. One Saturday morning in late spring, as I was teaching Sophia how to make my special cinnamon rolls, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Grandma, are Mom and Dad going to get divorced?" I carefully placed the rolling pin on the counter, buying time to formulate an appropriate response. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" She shrugged, her small hands still covered in flour. "They never talk to each other anymore, except about me and Jake or money stuff. Dad sleeps in the guest room all the time now, not just sometimes like before, and Mom cries a lot when she thinks we're asleep." I put my arm around her shoulders, leaving a flower handprint on her shirt that neither of us minded. "I don't know what your parents will decide. Sophia, sometimes adults go through difficult periods in their relationships. Some marriages recover from these challenges, and some don't. But whatever happens, both your parents love you and Jake very much, and that won't change. I think I'd be sad if they got divorced," she said thoughtfully, "but also maybe a little relieved. It's really tense at home all the time. It's like waiting for a storm that never quite happens." Her insight was remarkable for a child her age. That's a very mature way of looking at it. Sometimes even sad changes can bring relief when a situation has been difficult for a long time. Jake, who had been playing video games in the living room, wandered into the kitchen. At 8 years old, he was less introspective than his sister, but equally sensitive in his own way. "Are the cinnamon rolls ready yet?" he asked, eyeing the dough we were rolling out. "Not quite," I smiled. "But you can help us put the filling on once we're done rolling the dough." As Jake eagerly joined our baking project, the conversation naturally shifted to lighter topics: his soccer team, Sophia's art class, their friends at school. I marveled at their resilience, their ability to find joy and normalcy despite the turmoil in their home life. When Sean arrived to pick them up that afternoon, he seemed more at ease than usual, chatting about the children's activities and asking about my garden. As the kids gathered their things, he lingered on the terrace, looking out at the ocean. "Beautiful day," he commented, the kind Dad would have loved for fishing. The casual reference to his father, something he rarely did, surprised me. Yes, he would have had his tackle box packed before dawn. Sean smiled at the memory. "Remember how he used to wake me up at 4:30 for those fishing trips? I'd be so grumpy until we got out on the water. And then you'd be the one who didn't want to leave when the sun started setting." We shared a moment of genuine warmth, connected by these shared memories of a happier time. "Mom," Sean said after a pause, "I've made some decisions. Big ones." "Oh," I kept my tone neutral, sensing the seriousness in his voice. "I filed for divorce from Ellie. We tried counseling, but her heart wasn't in it. She can't get past the resentment, the blame. And honestly, I can't get past what she was willing to do to you, what she pushed me to do." Though I'd suspected this might be coming, the finality of his words still took me by surprise. "That's a significant step. Sean, how are you feeling about it? Sad, relieved, terrified?" He gave a rueful smile. "All of the above, but mostly determined to do better, be better for Sophia and Jake, and for myself." "The children know something's happening," I said gently. "Sophia asked me today if you were getting divorced." He nodded, unsurprised. "She's too perceptive for her own good sometimes. We're telling them officially tomorrow. I wanted you to know first, though." "Thank you for that. What are your plans now?" "I found an apartment not too far from the house. We'll have joint custody, but the kids will stay primarily with me during the school week since my work schedule is more flexible. I've also—" He hesitated, then continued. "I've also enrolled in night classes to get my accounting certification. It's time I developed some practical skills, built a career I can be proud of." "That's wonderful." "Sean," I said, genuinely pleased by this sign of personal growth. Your father would be proud. He looked away, blinking rapidly. I hope so. I've made such a mess of things, wasted so many years chasing status and possessions instead of building something real, something lasting. It's never too late to change course, I said. I was 50 when I started over after your father died. At 45, you still have plenty of time to create the life you want. That's what I'm trying to believe. He turned to face me directly. Mom, I know I have no right to ask, but I could use some advice about the divorce, about managing finances as a single parent, about everything. You did it all on your own, and you succeeded. I've never appreciated how remarkable that was until now. His words touched me deeply. For perhaps the first time, Sean was seeing me not as a parent who owed him support or as an obstacle to his ambitions, but as a person who had overcome significant challenges through determination and hard work. I'd be happy to offer whatever guidance I can, I said. But remember, your situation is different from mine. You have support from me, from other family members. You don't have to do everything alone like I did. Thank you, he said simply. That means more than I can say. As they were leaving, Sophia gave me an extra long hug. Next time, can you teach me how to make that lemon cake you brought for my birthday last year? Absolutely, I promised. We'll make it together. That evening, I sat on my terrace watching the sunset, reflecting on the day's revelations. Sean was divorcing Ellie, pursuing education, taking responsibility for his life and his children in a way he never had before. These were positive developments, signs of genuine growth arising from the painful consequences of his actions. Yet I felt a tinge of sadness for the failure of their marriage, for the disruption to my grandchildren's lives, for all the hurt and betrayal that had led to this point. There were no perfect outcomes in situations like this, only paths forward through the damage, opportunities to build something better from the ruins of what had been destroyed. A week later, Laura came to visit, staying in my guest room for a long weekend. We spent our days walking on the beach, cooking together, catching up on each other's lives. On our final evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on the terrace, she asked the question I knew had been on her mind. Are you happy, Tiffany, after everything that's happened? Have you found peace? I considered the question seriously. Happy is a complex word. I'm content with how I handled the situation. I'm relieved that justice was served. I'm cautiously optimistic about rebuilding some kind of relationship with Sean and maintaining strong connections with my grandchildren. I paused, watching the waves in the moonlight. But there's a sadness that remains, a sense of loss for what might have been, for the family bonds that should never have been broken. Laura nodded, understanding. That's natural. Some betrayals leave permanent marks, even after forgiveness. Forgiveness, I repeated thoughtfully. I'm not sure I'm there yet, especially with Ellie, with Sean. I'm working on it. I see his genuine remorse, his efforts to change. That makes forgiveness possible, even if it's not complete. And what about you? Laura asked. This has been an enormously stressful year. What are you doing to take care of yourself? To rebuild your own life beyond the family drama? It was a good question, one I hadn't given enough thought to. I'd been so focused on the legal battles, on processing the betrayal, on navigating the new dynamics with Sean and the grandchildren, that I hadn't considered my own needs and dreams beyond survival. I'm not sure, I admitted. For so long, it's been about protecting what I have, defending what I built. I haven't thought much about what comes next. Maybe it's time, Laura suggested gently. You're 71, healthy, financially secure, with a beautiful home and many good years ahead. What do you want those years to contain? Her question stayed with me long after she returned to Phoenix. What did I want for my remaining years? Not just to survive, not just to maintain what I had built, but to truly live, to find new purpose and meaning. The answer began to take shape gradually, emerging from my experiences and from the unexpected connections that formed in their aftermath. One afternoon, as I was volunteering at the community center where I'd started teaching a sewing class, I overheard a conversation between two older women that caught my attention. Had no idea what to do when her son took over her finances, one was saying. By the time she realized what was happening, he had emptied her accounts, taken out a second mortgage on her house. She's 82, has nowhere to go. It happens more than people realize, the other woman replied. My neighbor's daughter convinced her to sign over her house for tax purposes, then sold it and put her in a cheap nursing home. These predators count on our silence, our shame. Their words resonated with my own experience, the violation, the betrayal by family members, the exploitation of trust, the assumption that older people are easy targets, too confused or too embarrassed to fight back. Later that week, I met with William for lunch, ostensibly to discuss some minor legal matters, but really just to maintain the friendship that had developed during our professional relationship. You know, he said as we enjoyed our coffee after the meal, your case has inspired me to take on more elder abuse cases pro bono. Most seniors don't have the resources or the knowledge to fight back as effectively as you did. It shouldn't require exceptional resources or legal knowledge to protect oneself from family predators, I said, feeling a familiar indignation rising. No, it shouldn't, William agreed. But the reality is that many older adults, especially women, are vulnerable to financial exploitation precisely because they don't know their rights or how to assert them. Something clicked into place, then a purpose, a direction for my energy and experience. William, I said, what would you think about creating an educational program for seniors about their legal rights, particularly regarding property and financial matters? Simple workshops that provide practical information about protecting assets, recognizing warning signs of exploitation, knowing where to turn for help. His eyes lit up. I think it's a brilliant idea. There's a real need for that kind of community education. The legal system can punish abusers after the fact, but prevention through education would be far more effective. I could share my story, I continued, warming to the concept. Not just the legal aspects, but the emotional journey, the challenge of standing up to family members, the importance of maintaining dignity and independence. Your perspective would be invaluable, William agreed. And I could provide the legal framework, the specific rights and protections available under the law. By the end of lunch, we had sketched out the basics of what would become the Senior Empowerment Workshop Series, a monthly program offering practical guidance for older adults on protecting their legal and financial interests, recognizing signs of exploitation, and accessing resources for help. 3 months later, we held our first workshop at the community center. 23 seniors attended, mostly women in their 60s and 70s, many of them widowed like me. I shared my story, omitting some of the more painful personal details but emphasizing the warning signs I had missed, the steps I had taken to protect myself, and the resources that had helped me prevail. The response was overwhelming. Several attendees shared their own experiences of family exploitation or betrayal, many with tears in their eyes, expressing relief at finding a safe space to discuss these painful issues without judgment. Others asked practical questions about securing their assets, establishing clear boundaries with adult children, documenting their wishes legally. William provided clear and accessible information about powers of attorney, advance directives, property rights, and the legal definition of elder abuse. He offered free initial consultations to anyone who needed specific legal advice, creating a pathway to protection for those who might otherwise have remained vulnerable. As we were packing up after the workshop, an elegantly dressed woman in her late 70s approached me. Mrs. Brooks, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. I want to thank you for your courage in sharing your story. My son and his wife have been pressuring me to sign over my house to them for estate planning purposes. After hearing you today, I'm going to consult with Mr. Patterson before making any decisions. I'm so glad, I said, taking her hand. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. She nodded, squeezing my hand. You're helping more people than you know. As I drove home that evening, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, of purpose reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. My painful experience was being transformed into something valuable, something that could protect others from similar harm. The workshops became a monthly fixture, expanding to include guest speakers on financial planning, healthy aging, recognizing manipulation tactics, and maintaining independence. William and I developed written materials, created a website with resources, and eventually expanded to neighboring communities. Through this work, I found not just purpose, but community, a network of remarkable older adults who had survived their own challenges and emerged with wisdom and resilience. We shared stories, supported each other, celebrated victories both personal and collective, and in that community, in that purpose, I found an answer to Laura's question about what I wanted for my remaining years. I wanted to turn my pain into protection for others, my experience into education, my survival into support for those who might otherwise become victims. It wasn't the future I had imagined before the betrayal, but it was rich with meaning, connection, and the profound satisfaction of making a difference in the lives of others. 1 year after the court ruling that had changed everything, I hosted a small gathering at my beach house. Laura had come from Phoenix. William and his wife joined us. Sean was there with Sophia and Jake. Even Dr. Chen, whose professional evaluation had been so crucial to my case, accepted the invitation. It wasn't a celebration. Exactly. There was too much complicated history, too much lingering pain for that. But it was an acknowledgement of survival, of lessons learned, of new beginnings emerging from the wreckage of betrayal. The children played on the beach, building an elaborate sandcastle with moats and towers. Laura and William's wife chatted on the terrace, exchanging recipes and travel stories. William and Dr. Chen discussed the expanding senior empowerment program, which she had recently joined as a volunteer, offering cognitive assessments to seniors concerned about their mental capacity. Sean and I stood at the edge of the garden, watching the children play. They seem happy, I observed. Resilient? They are, Sean agreed. The divorce was hard on them, especially at first, but they've adjusted better than I expected, having a regular schedule, clear expectations, stable routines. It's helped a lot. And so have these visits with you. How are you doing with the shared custody arrangement? It's working reasonably well. Ellie and I keep our interactions focused on the kids. Very businesslike. She's dating someone new already, her boss at the real estate agency, actually. And how do you feel about that? He shrugged. Honestly, relieved. When she's focused on him, she's less likely to create drama around the custody arrangements or financial matters. And your studies, the accounting certification. At this, his face brightened. I'm doing well. It's challenging, especially balancing it with work and the kids. But I enjoy it. It suits the way my mind works, the precision, the order, the clear rules. Your father was good with numbers, too, I noted. He just never had the opportunity to develop that skill professionally. I didn't know that, Sean said, looking surprised. You never mentioned it before. There are many things about your father I haven't shared, I realized. Perhaps it's time I did. We were interrupted by Sophia, running up from the beach, her face flushed with excitement. Dad, Grandma, come see our castle before the tide gets it. We followed her down to the shore, where Jake was putting the finishing touches on a surprisingly sophisticated structure, complete with a bridge spanning the moat and shells decorating the walls. We made it for you, Grandma, Jake announced proudly. It's your beach house, but even better because it has a moat to keep out invaders. I laughed, touched by the symbolism that was probably more intentional than the 8-year-old realized. It's magnificent, Jake. You have a real talent for architecture. Can we take a picture of it before the tide comes in? Sophia asked. For your photo album. Absolutely, I said, taking out my phone. Everyone gather around the castle. As I framed the photo, Sean with an arm around each child, all three smiling with the elaborate sandcastle in front of them and the ocean behind, I felt a wave of emotion that was complex but not entirely painful. This moment, this connection, wouldn't exist without the difficult journey we had traveled. Later, as the sun began to set and our guests prepared to leave, William took me aside. I have some news you might find interesting. he said. "The doctor who falsified your medical report has lost his license permanently." The medical board's investigation discovered at least 7 other cases where he had provided fraudulent diagnoses for payment. 7 others, I repeated, thinking of those unknown seniors whose competence had been falsely questioned, whose autonomy had been threatened or perhaps even taken away based on fraudulent documents. "Have they been notified?" "Yes. The board is reaching out to all affected parties. I've offered our senior empowerment resources to help them understand their options." I nodded, grateful that some good might come from the exposure of this corruption. "Thank you for letting me know, and for everything you've done not just for me, but for all the seniors who've benefited from the program." "It's been my privilege," he said sincerely. "You turned a personal tragedy into a community resource. That's remarkably rare." After everyone had left, I sat alone on the terrace, watching the last colors of sunset fade over the ocean. The house was quiet again, bearing only the faint echoes of children's laughter and adult conversations. I thought about the journey of the past year from betrayal and humiliation to justice and renewal, from victim to advocate, from isolation to community. None of it had been easy. Some of the wounds would never fully heal, but there was a strength in the scars, a wisdom earned through pain, a purpose forged in adversity. At 72, I had discovered new dimensions of my own resilience, new ways to contribute to the world, new connections with those who shared my experiences and values. I had protected what was rightfully mine, not just my property, but my dignity, my autonomy, my right to define my own worth. And perhaps most importantly, I had shown my grandchildren that age does not diminish one's right to respect, that standing up for oneself is not selfish but necessary, that betrayal may break the heart but need not break the spirit. As darkness settled over the ocean, I felt at peace in my home, in my life, in my continuing journey. The beach house that had been the focus of so much conflict had become, once again, a sanctuary not just for me, but for all those who would gather here in the spirit of mutual respect and genuine care. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chapters in this ongoing story. I would face them as I had faced all the challenges of my life with clarity, with courage, and with the quiet confidence of a woman who knew her own worth and would never again allow it to be diminished by anyone. The ocean waves continued their eternal rhythm, washing the shore clean, creating space for new footprints, new castles, new beginnings. Like the ocean, life continued its ceaseless movement, sometimes destructive, sometimes nurturing, always changing, always offering another chance to build something meaningful from whatever remains after the storm.